What's up, Wizards? Dev, back again from that channel down there. Been a couple of days, but I'm back. This video is for Mr. Miggy Chavez. I believe that you requested a budget land destruction deck for Standard, which is a hell of a challenge, to be honest. This is almost, I'm not even sure this can be rightfully done, but I think we may have pulled it off. Here it is for you, brother. As well as anyone else who may be interested in this. Well, let's run through the spells first, because this is a land destruction deck. But we've only got a couple of land destruction spells, so let's go ahead and give them to you. Right now we're playing 4 Demolish and 4 Desecration Plague, which are pretty malleable. You know, if you're not destroying lands, you're destroying, you know, artifacts or enchantments. Enchantments, that's pretty important, turns out. You're going to be busting up, you know, you've always got an option with Desecration Plague. That's a good card. But if you want to play it as a straight-up land destruction deck, you can, but it's cool that you have the option to bust up other things, aka Perilous Vault, for example. You've got main deck hate against Perilous Vault. In the spells, we're also playing some Burn, because we're playing red. We're playing 3 copies of Wild Slash, 4 copies of Lightning Strike, and 1 Roast, it turns out. Roast, we have that main deck to take care of specific threats. But Wild Slash and Lightning Strike, you can burn them out for that last few damage if you need to, and burn out their creatures early in the game, because it's going to take us a couple of turns to be able to bust lands, the way that Wizards has land destruction sort of set up right now. If you didn't know, Wizards sort of has a crusade against efficient land destruction and against land destruction being a deck at all. So, especially in Standard. In Modern, you can probably pull it off, but honestly, in Standard, really don't have that many tools because of the way they design cards that destroy lands. So, there's that to contend with. And we have one more card here in the spells, and it's Burn. I could have included it there, but it has a special spot. This is Crater's Claws. This obviously not only busts up stuff, busts up anything of a high toughness, but also will help you some of the time to finish off the game. You know, that last 6-7 points of damage. So really help you because we don't have much reach. Although that's the thing about a land destruction deck. It doesn't need to play ridiculous threats or anything because they don't have that many lands, it turns out. So let's go on to the creatures and talk about those threats for just a moment. Well, we should probably play mana guys before we get to the threats. We want to play our land destruction as quickly as possible to sort of offset the fact that they have boosted the casting cost of land destruction over the last few years to make sure that it literally isn't efficient. So we have to play mana guys to make it more efficient. We're playing 4 copies of Elvish Mystic, 3 copies of Rattleclaw Mystic. Now you might be thinking this is a budget deck, but Rattleclaw might be the most expensive card in the entire deck, and it's only a couple of bucks on TCG Player right now. You can get it for less. I think it's like $1.60 or something on TCG Player. So, yeah, really not that expensive, honestly. And we need our mana guys for more reasons than just the land destruction aspect. We're also running dudes pretty high up on the top of the curve that we want to play as early as possible. We've got 3 copies of Heir of the Wilds in here. We want to gum up the works a little bit in the early game. Plus, we've got some stuff with that 4 power to make it ferocious a thing later on in the game. So it's both aggressive and defensive. But it's mostly, we're going to play it as, you know, a Typhoid Rats or whatever, you know. Just a small guy with Death Touch that's going to make them think twice about swinging and occasionally trade up in the early games. Very important. Let's talk about some bigger guys. We got 2 copies of Ember Swallower in this. Possibly should be more, but I want to make room for other threats. Ember Swallower, obviously, in here to bust lands up, but it's cool that he's a 4-mana 4/5. You know, that's more than fair in a lot of ways. And if we've got mana acceleration, if we can hit that monstrous quick enough, then we're going to really cripple them, and we've got mana guys where sometimes they won't. We actually do fairly well against some decks, and I'll talk about that in a second. We've also got 2 copies of Polukranos, the Eater of the Things. Polukranos, I looked on TCG Player, he is surprisingly low right now, and he is a very, very good threat, especially in a deck that generates a fair amount of mana. 4 mana 5/5, like I don't know what is not to like about Polukranos, and while we're trying to look for a sort of premium threat in a budget deck, I think he's a really good choice. So I suggest him. He's gonna help also sort of clean up stuff that's still sitting out there on the board after you've, you know, destroyed a couple of lands, destroyed a couple of creatures you're trying to take over. Once you monstrous him, he should take care of the last threat or 2. In an ideal world. We'll see. we are playing 4 copies of Destructor Dragon. I really, really like this card, it turns out. I've done very minimal testing with the deck so far, but in every deck, or in every game, I want to see this guy, it turns out. We can play him, you know, turn 4 some of the time, turn 5 a lot of the time, and honestly, your opponent doesn't want to remove him. He's just a 4/4 flyer that sits out there, blocks other dragons all day for the most part, the dragons that we see being played. For the most part, blocks them all day, and if he blocks them and dies, they're going to lose a thing, sometimes a planeswalker even. And of course he's in here because he can destroy lands, which is pretty cool, and sometimes you'll want to do that. But he also busts up things like Perilous Fault, enchantments that people are playing with like crazy, and, you know, planeswalkers for that matter. So I really like Destructor Dragon. Big body, big threat, and when he dies, I mean, this is one of the threats that it's a 4/4 flyer that they don't want to remove, which it turns out usually makes for a fair magic card. Or an unfair magic card. And finally, in the creatures, we're playing 2 copies of Secret Tech here. This is Archetype of Endurance. This is a budget deck, so I wanted to find something really low price that had an interesting, you know, play value in this format. Right now, we see a lot of Silumgar the Drifting Death, we see a lot of Ojutai, and those are creatures we would really like to lose hexproof, it turns out. And it'd be really cool if our guys had hexproof. Makes Destructor Dragon a little harder to remove, so that's kind of weird synergy. But I want other guys to lose hexproof, especially against Control, a deck that we do fairly well against. And as a matter of fact, let's talk for a second about what we do and don't do well against. Well, I'm going to go ahead and post the lands right here. In a second, we'll talk about the board. We do interestingly well against Control, although Control does run far more lands than anything in the format, but it needs all of those drops. So the problem, the sort of push-pull with Control is that we can destroy its lands if they don't counter those LD spells, but we're kind of more than fine with that because then we might be able to push through our actual threats. However, like I said, Control does play 26, 27 lands, so unless we win fairly quickly after we start blowing lands away, they're going to find the lands that they need to help close out the game. So there's an interesting push-pull against Control. Aggro, we have some tools against. As a matter of fact, I think it might be now time to post the sideboard up here. Aggro we have some tools against, but we do much better out of the sideboard against aggro. Mid-range, we do fairly well against, although we don't have the removal we need once their important pieces hit the board, although we do have the land destruction we need to help keep them from hitting the board, things like a Tarka, but those decks will often play mana accelerants, creatures, the same way we are. So our strategy is not as effective against those decks in a lot of ways, especially since we're destroying lands on our usually 3rd, 4th turn. So a lot of mid-range decks play, you know, Siege Rhino on their 3rd turn, and we have a hard time keeping up with that. The one saving grace that we have is if we're on the play, we can play Llanowar Elves turn 1, or we can play Mystic turn 2. And by our 3rd turn, we're busting lands. So on the play, that's good. You know, they'll only have a couple of lands at that point. And I'm going to go ahead and put up the power rankings for this deck. As you can see, it's not particularly good or terrible at any one thing. It's really middle of the road in a lot of ways. That's because it's really hard to predict how well the deck is going to do against certain things. Like I said, we do pretty well out of the sideboard against aggro. We're running Hornet Nest, which is really good against aggro, another copy of Roast, another copy of Wild Slash. So that helps us a lot after the board, but I feel like we're about the same post-board, as you can see down there. Because game 1, the thing about it is they're not going to really know, in a lot of ways, how to deal with LD, because we really don't see much Ponza nowadays. Really at all. Once they figure out what you're doing, once you blow the first land up, they're going to be like, oh, what is this? But they're not going to know what to expect. Now, coming out of the sideboard, I think that they're going to have a better chance, but we have a fairly strong sideboard, which evens it up. Thus, the same number game 1 in post-board. We're fairly consistent. If the deck has a strong suit, I would say it is that. We always do something, whether it's blow up lands or play larger threats. Obviously, if you had more money, you could do a fair amount with this deck. But I feel like if you had more money, the deck would just become green-red dragons, to be honest. So, yeah, honestly, that's what I've got to say. I feel like we've got fair to middling game against some stuff. But, you know, the longer the game goes, I feel like the more we get run over. And the way land destruction is designed, the game's going to go long. So let me know how you guys feel. Take it up to FNM, test it against your friends. The deck is fun to play with. It's always fun to blow up lands. And like I said, we're fairly versatile in the way we play our LD here. You know, Destructor Dragon can blow up more than just lands. Demolish can blow up more than just lands. Desecration Plague blows up more than just lands. But I'm not really sure how versatile we are on the whole against some of the better stuff in the format right now. So if you enjoyed this content, like, share, comment, subscribe. I hope that you liked it, MtG Chavez. We appreciate you suggesting deck ideas, you know. So, yeah, a couple of things I want to tell you about. Tony and I are about to record the Grixis deck debate, the great deck debate, I'll call it for now. That's going to be really fun, and I've got an idea. I think I'm going to record it alongside this video, actually. We're going to do new deck of the week from now on. That's where we look at tournament results on all the different websites, and we come up with the new deck that we haven't seen before of the week that's either the most fun or might make the biggest impact. This week, I'm going to do 5-color blue dragons, which is kind of weird sounding, but the deck is really, really good looking, and I'm going to show it to you in the next day or so, so bear with us. We've got a lot of content coming your way. Plus, Magic Origins spoilers coming out, and you know how much, I mean, that's Christmas for us. We love spoiler season. So, subscribe, because then you'll get all that awesome content, and we'll just get to know each other. You know, we talk all the time in the comments. We're still a small channel, so we totally do that. In any case, let us know what you guys think. We're always down for that. I'm Dev from MtG, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching, Wizards.